right, everybody, welcome back. Coffee and question time. And so let's talk about finishes a little bit. Now with this one, whether it's a carved out bowl or whether I'm using the lathe, it doesn't matter. Concept will be the same. I have my little Badger Airbrush right here, and you can see it's kind of a reddish color in here. So what I did is I put a couple of drops of dye in here, trans tint. This is brushing lacquer, and I stirred it up. So this is called toning, because this color will be built into the finish. I can make it as bold as I want, strong. I can make it super light. In this case, I made it just about medium, but we're gonna do this inner part right here. Okay, now, don't go overboard, because you're gonna build the coats. So we're gonna build one after another after another. Now the rest of this was done kind of the same way. There's a little more yellow in this, and I was playing around. It's like an experimental piece here, but on the outside, and remember what I told you about lacquer. Each coat burns into the previous coat. Let it harden real good and keep doing that, and the coats will keep building up. Now somebody said you can't use lacquer or brushing lacquer as a sealer, and you should use a wood sealer before you start applying the finish. I use brushing lacquer. I add just a little bit more lacquer thinner to it, and I apply it, and then I use that 4/0 steel wool. I go over it really well, and I do that a couple of times, and that gives me my sealer coat. You can buy sealer coat finishes out at any of the big box stores. I've had them, I ran out. So I can use the same finish I'm gonna use as my sealer, and then build up from there. So we take a look at this, go around. We're gonna let this set up for a little bit, okay? Especially up in here. I can see it's still wet. Now remember, I'm using a different kind of lacquer thinner now. It's that nanoskin I talked about in the previous video. It has a medium setup rate, and it's got low VOC. Take a little bit longer to set up, which is fine. So, but this you can do, you can add color to this. I can add amber to this. I could add orange, green, red, black, whatever you want. And then when you put this on, and like I said, it's called toning, you can actually change the color. This was a white piece of wood. It was almost just stark white. I didn't like it. It seemed to be a good project for toning. I could have used wood dye, I could have used stain, you could have done a multitude of things. This video is just about toning. So you can add a little bit of dye into here. I use trans tint. There are other ones available. You can actually, I'm told from Michael's and some of the supply stores, you can actually get oil-based pigment paint. Put a couple of, just like a little bit in there and stir it up and keep looking at it. But always keep notes on how many drops. Like in this one, I put 5 drops of trans tint. That's pretty bold. Usually like with amber, I'll put 2 or 3 drops. That's it. Trans tint goes a long way, but trans tint's expensive. You could try the oil-based pigment paints from Michael's. I haven't done that. Let me know in the comment below if that's what you do. This is kind of your quick tip of the day. I'm using the Badger spray gun. I'll drop it in the link below. I've done several videos on this, like I keep mentioning. It's kind of my go-to for finishing now, unless I'm doing an oil finish. We'll talk about that in another video. Okay, folks. Let's go back to questions and answers. I'm going to switch back over to the desk. All right, folks, welcome back. So questions and answers. Trans tint. They're these little vials. I'll try to leave the link below. It's expensive, but it goes a long way. I've had these for well over a year, year and a half. This one is Bordeaux red. This one is amber yellow. You can also get just yellow. This is amber, has a little bit more darkness to it. I kind of like the amber. Bordeaux, you can get reds, greens, blacks. You can get a multitude of colors. Okay, so that's what I use. There are other aniline dyes out there, powders and stuff you can buy and mix. That's true. I've used those in the past. I just favor trans tint. So that's my comment on that. What else? When am I going to talk about doing an oil finish? Probably in the next video or so. I'll show you what I go through, a little bit longer process in terms of both sanding and finish work, but we'll talk about that in another video because otherwise it gets way too long. People don't want to watch super long videos. So what else can I tell you about this? Let's see. Okay, one of the comments relates to the effect that I get on the wood. It's going to be different every time because the wood itself is different. The wood grain is different. The type of wood, everything about it, and the sanding. Now, how much did you sand? I will go to 150, stop and look at it and think I can build a nice film finish on here, and I stop a lot of times at 150. And I sell these, you know, really easily. It's not that hard. A film finish, I don't see the point in sanding up to 400, 600, 800, 1,000 and all of that. The other thing is you want something for that finish to grab onto, okay? You want it to have a little bit of a rough surface. I mean, you want that finish to grab. You start getting up into 2,000 grit and beyond where you're really polishing more than you are sanding, it doesn't really have anything to grab onto. It still works, I've done it, but I don't think as well. That's just my own personal view on sanding. Everything is in the prep work, like I told you before. You want to sand everything correctly. Reading store glasses, look at it, okay? Make sure you got out the previous grits marks before you advance in grits. I try to stay somewhere within 50. When I start getting up to 220, then I can start jumping a little bit more. Sanding is a matter of like scatter visually. Pretty soon the eye looks at it as just smooth and you're not seeing visually anymore, you know, those rough scratches, so you can take bigger jumps. So when I get to 320, I'll probably go 400, 500, 800, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, 2,000, whatever. I start jumping like that, and I take my time. Now, when I start getting up 800 or better, I'm wet sanding. That's what I do. And I use oil finishes at that point because it'll give it a really warm, like kind of a glow. It's kind of like an inviting thing, you just want to go pick it up. It looks nice. And like I said, now there are other projects where I use the lacquer. It gives it that nice gloss finish. Now some people like the gloss finish, other people don't. They prefer semi-gloss or a matte finish. It's dependent on the project, it's depending on your customer too. So you got to take a look at that, I mean, along with everything else. But every piece of wood is going to turn out differently. Depends on species, and like I said, in your sanding technique and your finishing techniques, what I will tell you, especially when it comes to this trans tint and toning, keep track of how many drops you put in how much lacquer or brushing lacquer or whatever you're using. Keep notes on it. That way you can replicate that finish. I learned the hard way a long time ago. I came up with this way of putting 3 different dyes on something. It turned out spectacular. I was like, wow. Time went by and I couldn't remember the combinations of the dye to the solvent that I was putting it in or the finish, and I didn't remember, and it makes you mad. Like I said, you're going to have failures along the way. That was a failure on my end. I learned from it. I learned now to keep notes. I just got a scratch pad, like notebook thing of paper that I keep out in the shop where I write things that I need on there, but I also keep notes on my finishing techniques. That way I can replicate them exactly if I need to again. So those are just some tips on the toning part of this. You saw me spray it. You know, I'm still a believer in the Badger spray gun. I keep taunting that and keep telling you, hey, it's, you know, it's great, but it's nice single action hobby spray gun. Nothing super high end, but it works really well for me with lacquers, solvents, and like, you know, and you can use urethane finishes in it. You can use lots of different finishes. I can spray Danish oil through it, you know, and I can thin it. I can do whatever I want. I can adjust the spray tip and the PSI coming into it, like I showed you in a previous video. That will help you perfect your spray pattern. All right, I'm the Home Handyman. I hope you liked the video. I hope you click subscribe, keep following me, and probably on the next video, we'll start talking about oil finishing and how I go about that. If you folks like these videos, I'll keep doing them. I always take a look at the view count and see what people are interested in. I look at the comments to see if there's something I haven't explained, you know, clearly enough. I try, like I've said in my previous videos, I watch lots of videos on YouTube on people that do things and they leave out a lot of things. They don't tell you how they sanded something, or you'll see them apply a finish, but they won't tell you what it is, and they won't tell you exactly how they did it. And I just click off. I just like, okay, I'm not getting what I want out of the video, or, it's too bad that they didn't spend the time to actually describe it. I try to describe everything in detail so you can replicate it in your garage, and hopefully you got good results. I'm the Home Handyman. I hope you click subscribe. Keep following me. I'll see you soon. We'll talk about oil finishes next, I believe. Thank you. Bye-bye.